Now, this one we're definitely going to have some emotional feelings towards, and I'll say it now. I am not surprised by this news in the slightest, and I feel like I've been saying this for a little bit now. And that's Tom Holland was recently interviewed about Spider-Man No Way Home, and he said they were treating this one like the end of the franchise or the end of an era, which kind of supports my theory that I've had for a little bit that Marvel themselves in the MCU didn't always plan for this movie to be a multiverse movie, and they kind of needed a quick out for Spider-Man.
Yes.
And Tom has said something about, well, if we're fortunate enough to continue the Spider-Man franchise, we would need to be taking a break, and it would come back in a very different incarnation, which gets me very both excited and nervous at the same time. It gets me excited because maybe we could finally stop being so Stark dependent, and he can actually be allowed to be his own character. But at the same time, that could also be interpreted as he'll be in the MCU, kind of, in the sense of he'll be in the larger MCU multiverse, but he'll be now over at Sony type of situation. Like, until a new deal has been made between Disney and Sony, I will still operate under the assumption that at any moment he could be ripped away again. And I think that might be what's happening here. This and there's one other movie on his contract. This could theoretically be the end of Tom Holland's Spider-Man in the MCU, but there's just too much money to be made by taking him out. So I don't know. I'm still very apprehensive about No Way Home. I'm looking forward to it because it's Spider-Man, but I can't help but shake the nervousness that I'm feeling about this, especially hearing this of like, this is the end of our franchise. Now, we've heard rumors of Sony and Marvel want to do a new trilogy together of Peter Parker in college. Cool. You got to come together and make a new deal for that. And to take a break would probably be a good idea, at least for a little bit, so Tom can focus on other things like starting up an Uncharted franchise. But I don't know. It's like all those new like red flag memes that have been popping up all over the place for some reason.
That I've been showing you. Yeah, boy, let's go.
Like this to me is kind of giving me some red flags. Am I overreacting, Josh?
So first of all, who keeps letting Tom Holland be interviewed without?
He didn't spoil anything, at least. He didn't be like, I was hanging out with Andrew the other day. Who's Andrew? Andrew Thomas, our production manager.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, like, oh, dude. Like, let's... And now I think because of the end credit scene in Venom, it's even more, like, likely that at the very least, Andrew will show up. But, you know, we'll see what happens. I want to take this as... This is the completion of the high school Peter Parker franchise. You know what I mean? You know how like we separate the Star Wars Skywalker story into 3 different sections? I want to sit here and say that it is the completion of that section of the story, and that's what he means. And because if that's the case, in order to have a high school teenage Peter Parker, yeah, you would have to come back with different incarnations because now Tom would be too old to play him. Although he does have a baby face. So
I don't know. Ralph Macchio played Karate Kid for all 3 of the first movies, and he was like in his 30s by the time of the third one rolled around.
I mean, that's fair, but that's also a movie from the 80s. So, but that's the only way I can rationalize this in a way that doesn't make it sound like Sony's taking Spider-Man back and that's going to be that. It sucks because while I say that, I wouldn't mind Tom Holland's Spider-Man interacting with Tom Hardy's Venom. I do think that would be a cool thing to do, but just taking Spider-Man out of this Marvel universe that they've worked so hard to create just feels like a pretty big loss. They're taking a pretty big L on that one.
Spider-Man to me has always been tricky in the MCU because Kevin Feige has been so meticulous about all of his pieces. but he owns all of his pieces except
Yeah.
for Spider-Man. And so I always get the sense that Kevin Feige wants to make Spider-Man a central character of the MCU, because hearing him in interviews, Kevin Feige understands and knows Spider-Man is the guy when it comes to Marvel, just storytelling, Stan Lee's passion. He's like Stan Lee's favorite character. Spider-Man is important to the Marvel pantheon, and I feel like Kevin Feige wants to put a lot of the Marvel universe on
Yeah.
Spider-Man's shoulders, but he can't or doesn't want to, because one thing goes wrong and Sony doesn't want him to play anymore. They can just pull that Jenga piece out and the whole tower comes crumbling down very, very quickly. A tower that Kevin Feige has spent so much time working on. Supposedly, again, these are just rumors. We're not reporting this as fact by any stretch of the imagination. But supposedly the reason we have not gotten a Spider-Man No Way Home poster yet is because Sony really wants it to be spoiler-filled to get people in butts into seats, whereas Feige and Marvel are more like, no, we want there to be surprises, so, like, don't put
Yeah.
certain characters on the poster.
At least the first poster.
But the first poster might be the only poster, because we're coming up on November soon, in which case, once we hit November, movie's coming out next month. Like,
Jeez.
we're not
It
that
really
far away
is
from
that-
Spider-Man.
yeah.
Yeah.
And we still haven't gotten like a real full trailer yet.
That's
Like,
supposedly coming maybe the 25th.
Yeah, but they've been rumoring trailers for how long? And then we got that weird teaser that was, while cool, was really underwhelming to me. I don't know, man. I'm really hoping this is not the end of Tom Holland's Spider-Man, at least in the Disney universe. If anything, I hope that they allow him to make appearances in the Sony villain saga, is what I guess I'm gonna call it. Excuse me. But yeah, who knows what will happen. I agree with you on though. It does seem like, especially with how they treat Far From Home, it does seem like Kevin Feige wants to put Marvel on Tom's shoulders, but can't because you
Legal.
never know. Yeah, we don't know if he's going to be around.